As an estate appraiser, I am trained to look at a room full of chaos and instantly calculate the exact financial value of the damage. But when I came home to find my father and brother destroying my basement vault while screaming at my terrified 9-year-old daughter, the only thing I calculated was exactly how many years in prison their extortion attempt would cost them. They were tearing apart my inventory, searching for the provenance papers to my grandfather's multi-million-dollar antique collection, completely unaware that the folders they were holding contained RFID tracking chips. I had returned home 3 hours early from a client consultation in the city. My car is electric, which means it pulls into the driveway in complete silence. I unlocked the front door and immediately noticed the muddy boot prints tracking across the hardwood floor. Then, I heard it, the unmistakable hollow crash of porcelain shattering against concrete. It was coming from beneath my feet. I did not call out. I slipped off my shoes, walked silently through the mudroom, and stood at the top of the basement stairs. The basement was my secure appraisal vault, a climate-controlled room secured by a heavy steel door and a digital keypad. The door was propped wide open, its lock violently drilled out. From my vantage point in the shadows of the stairwell, I could see the entire room. My father, Arthur, was standing over my daughter, Lily. She was backed into the far corner near a mahogany grading table, clutching her school backpack to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and overflowing with silent tears. She was trying so hard not to make a sound, trembling like a trapped bird. A few feet away, my older brother Marcus was tearing through my archival filing cabinets. He was ripping open acid-free boxes and tossing documents onto the floor like garbage. "Where does she keep the blue binders, Lily?" my father barked, leaning closer to her. He pointed a finger at her face. "Your mother hides everything from us. Don't lie to your grandfather. Where are the authentication papers?" "I don't know," Lily sobbed, shrinking further into the corner. "Please, I don't know." Marcus kicked a Victorian display case. The glass cracked, a sharp sound that made Lily flinch violently. "Tell her to stop crying and just point to the safe, Dad," Marcus snapped, out of breath. "We don't have all day. The auction house needs these provenance files by tomorrow morning, or the broker walks away." In a crisis, normal people panic. Normal daughters would run down the stairs screaming, asking why their own flesh and blood was doing this. But my profession requires me to detach and evaluate. I stood in the dark and mentally inventoried the scene. I saw a shattered 19th century replica vase, estimated loss $4,000. I saw a damaged Victorian display case, estimated loss $2,000. I saw the psychological damage being inflicted on my only child, incalculable. I knew exactly why they were here. My grandfather had left his entire antique collection to me, knowing I was the only one in the family who wouldn't immediately pawn it to cover bad debts. My father's landscaping business had been bankrupt for 2 years. Marcus was drowning in gambling loans. They had somehow stolen a few of the antique pieces, but in the high-end art world, an antique without its original provenance papers is essentially worthless. They needed the certificates of authenticity to sell the items to a private broker. They needed my files. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to rush down the stairs and put myself between them and my daughter. But I knew Arthur and Marcus. They were bigger, stronger, and completely desperate. If I intervened without leverage, they would corner both of us and force me to open the main safe. Instead, I stepped back into the shadows. I pulled my phone from my pocket, dialed 911, and held it to my ear. 911, what is your emergency? The operator answered. My father and brother broke into my home, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. They are destroying property and cornering my 9-year-old daughter in the basement. Send officers immediately. Officers are on the way, the operator replied. Are there any weapons? No weapons visible, but they are aggressive. I am staying on the line. I muted my microphone and slipped my phone into my blazer pocket. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my professional dictaphone. It was a high-end directional voice recorder I used to dictate condition reports in large, echoey auction halls. I slid the switch to record. A tiny, unblinking red light turned on. Downstairs, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. He pulled a stack of thick blue folders from the bottom drawer of a cabinet. "Got them! Dad, I got the provenance files!" He began stuffing the folders into a canvas duffel bag. My father looked at Lily, his face twisting into a cold smile. "See? Was that so hard? If your mother actually cared about this family, we wouldn't have to do things the hard way." I watched them pack the folders, feeling a chilling sense of calm wash over me. The police were 3 minutes away. The recorder was capturing every threat. And the blue folders Marcus was so frantically shoving into his bag were nothing but decoys. The real certificates were in a bank deposit box downtown. The folders he had just stolen were rigged with active RFID inventory trackers tied directly to my insurance company. It was time to go downstairs and let them think they were in control. I stepped out of the shadows and let my heels click loudly against the cold concrete steps as I descended into the basement. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Marcus froze, the canvas duffel bag half-zipped in his hands. My father, Arthur, spun around, his face briefly flashing with surprise before settling into a hardened mask of irritation. He did not look guilty. He looked annoyed, like a man who had simply been interrupted while doing chores. "Mom!" Lily screamed. She broke away from the corner and ran across the room. I dropped to one knee and caught her, wrapping my arms tightly around her shaking shoulders. She buried her face into my blazer, her small hands gripping my lapels so hard her knuckles turned white. "I've got you, sweetie," I whispered, pressing my hand to the back of her head. "You are completely safe, I promise." I stood up, keeping Lily tucked securely behind my leg. The red recording light of the dictaphone glowed faintly inside my pocket, completely hidden from their view. The muted 911 call was still active on my phone. "You're home early," Arthur said smoothly, crossing his arms. He actually had the audacity to sound conversational. "And you have drilled through a commercial-grade biometric vault lock," I replied, my voice steady, professional, and entirely devoid of emotion. "That is felony destruction of property. You have smashed a 19th-century display case. That is grand larceny. And you have terrified my daughter in her own home." Marcus let out a short, harsh laugh. He hoisted the heavy canvas bag over his shoulder. "Oh, stop sounding like a corporate robot, Mia. We're just taking back what Grandpa meant for the whole family. You were just the custodian. You've been hoarding this wealth while Dad's business went under, and I was drowning in debt. It's unfair, and you know it." "The collection was left to me because I am a licensed appraiser, Marcus," I said, staring at the bag. "And because Grandpa knew you would sell a century of family history to a discount broker just to cover your gambling losses." Marcus's face flushed red, but Arthur held up a hand to stop him. My father took a slow step forward, crushing a piece of the broken porcelain vase beneath his boot. "Let's not make this ugly, Mia," Arthur said, his voice dropping into that deep, authoritative tone he always used when he wanted to force submission. "We already have the provenance folders. We have the authentication certificates for the Ming-era bronzes and the Victorian silver. But the auction house broker is strict. He won't wire the money unless the chain of custody is digitally cleared." I looked at him, feeling a new layer of ice form in my veins. They didn't just want to steal the physical papers, they wanted me to legitimize the theft. "You want me to log into my appraisal portal," I stated flatly. "Exactly," Arthur smiled, though his eyes remained cold. "You are going to log into the database, digitally authorize the transfer of ownership to Marcus's LLC, and clear the titles. Once you do that, we walk out of here. The broker gets his clean paperwork tomorrow morning. We get the money to save the family, and you get to go back to your quiet, perfect little life." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Marcus stepped closer, dropping the heavy bag onto the grading table with a loud thud. Lily flinched behind me. "If you refuse, we take these physical papers anyway. We'll find a black market buyer who doesn't care about your digital portals. But it will be messy. It will take months. and we will keep coming back here. We will make your life a nightmare until you cooperate." Arthur looked down at Lily, who was trembling against my leg, and then back at me. "Look at your daughter, Mia. She's exhausted. She's scared. Do you really want to drag this out and make it worse for her? Log into the system, authorize the transfer, and we leave. Be a good mother. Fix this." There it was, the ultimate manipulation, the attempt to weaponize my love for my child to force my compliance. Years ago, that tactic might have worked. Years ago, I might have swallowed my anger, logged into the system, and handed over the legacy just to make the screaming stop. I would have called it keeping the peace. But the woman standing in the basement vault wasn't a scared daughter anymore. She was a mother, and she was an expert in calculating exactly what people owed. "You think breaking a lock and terrorizing a child makes you powerful?" I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "But all you have done is hand me everything I need to guarantee neither of you will ever step foot on my property again." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, the faint, high-pitched wail of police sirens pierced through the thick basement walls. The wail of the sirens shifted from a distant echo to a deafening shriek that vibrated through the concrete walls of the basement. Red and blue lights began flashing through the small egress window near the ceiling, sweeping across the shattered porcelain on the floor. Marcus dropped his hands from the canvas bag, his eyes darting toward the stairs. "What did you do?" he hissed, the arrogant smirk completely wiped from his face. Arthur's authoritative posture collapsed. "Mia, tell me you didn't call the police. Over family? Over paperwork?" "I didn't call them over paperwork," I said, my voice steady. "I called them because you cornered my child." Heavy footsteps pounded across the hardwood upstairs. "Police! Make yourselves known!" A stern voice echoed down the stairwell. "In the basement!" I yelled. Two officers descended the stairs with their hands resting on their holstered weapons. As soon as they entered the vault, Arthur raised both hands in a practiced, placating gesture. He immediately slipped back into the role of the reasonable patriarch. "Officers, please, there's no need for alarm," Arthur said smoothly, forcing a chuckle. "This is just a massive misunderstanding, a family disagreement over some inheritance. My daughter is highly emotional right now." "Emotional?" I repeated. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket, the screen brightly displaying the active 911 call. "The dispatcher has been listening on mute for the last 10 minutes. Arthur's forced smile faltered. Then I pulled out the professional dictaphone, the red recording light still blinking in the dim room. "And this high-fidelity appraisal recorder just captured you demanding digital access to a multi-million-dollar estate while threatening to make my life a nightmare." Officer Miller, the taller of the two, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the drilled-out biometric lock, the smashed display case, and Lily, who was still clinging tightly to my leg. He turned to Marcus. "Step away from the bag, sir. What's inside?" "Just family documents," Marcus stammered, raising his hands. "Copies, nothing illegal." "That is a canvas duffel bag filled with blue appraisal binders," I told the officers, my voice echoing clinically in the vault. "But they are not the provenance certificates they were looking for. The authentic documents were transferred to a secure bank deposit box yesterday." Marcus looked at the bag, then at me, his breathing shallow. "Then what did I just pack?" "Decoys," I said simply. "As a licensed estate appraiser, my inventory is heavily insured. My underwriter requires high-value portfolios to be tracked during transit. The folders you just tried to steal are laced with active RFID tracking chips." Marcus frantically unzipped the bag and yanked open one of the blue folders. Inside were stacks of blank copy paper. Embedded in the spine of the binder was a thick, unmistakable plastic RFID security node. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of two arrogant men realizing their entire scheme had just locked them in a cage of their own making. "Hands behind your back," Officer Miller ordered, stepping toward my father. Arthur didn't fight with his fists. He fought with his pride. "Mia, you are destroying this family," he shouted as the heavy metal handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "No," I replied, watching them march him toward the stairs. "I am appraising the damage, and I am cutting my losses." The legal aftermath moved with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate audit. There were no quiet family settlements. There were no hushed apologies at Thanksgiving. Armed with the 911 dispatch audio, the dictaphone recording, and the physical evidence of the drilled lock, the prosecutor did not offer leniency. Arthur and Marcus were indicted for felony burglary, grand larceny, attempted extortion, and child endangerment. Arthur's landscaping business was liquidated to pay the massive civil restitution for the destroyed antiques and the damaged biometric vault. Marcus lost the last of his credit, facing years in state prison where his self-serving excuses meant absolutely nothing. They had broken into my house, searching for documents that would make them rich, but the documents I kept made them destitute. 6 months later, the basement vault was fully repaired. The heavy steel door had a new biometric lock, and the antiques rested safely in their cases. But the most important repair didn't happen in the basement. It happened upstairs. Lily stopped flinching when the front door opened. She started painting again at the kitchen table, her laughter returning to fill the quiet spaces of our home. I sat across from her one evening, watching the afternoon sun light up her face. People who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries cruel. They will tell you that family deserves endless chances and that holding them accountable is a betrayal. But I learned that day that true betrayal is asking a child to trade her sense of safety for an adult's comfort. I never logged into the appraisal portal for them. I never signed the release. I just gathered the evidence, let the trap snap shut, and learned the greatest lesson my profession could ever teach me. Sometimes, the most valuable thing you can do is recognize exactly what a relationship is worth and refuse to pay a single cent more.